The scream tore through the training field before anyone could stop it. Illyra Voss hit the ground hard, her shoulders scraping against stone, and the crowd around her did nothing but watch. No one moved to help her up. No one ever did. "Get up," snarled Garrick, the boy she had been paired with for the testing ritual. He stood over her, his chest puffed with pride, as if knocking down an Omega girl half his size was something to be proud of. "Cursed thing. You don't even deserve to stand in this circle." Illyra pushed herself up on trembling arms. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, but she refused to cry. Crying only made them laugh harder. She had learned that lesson years ago, back when she was 7 years old, and the healer first saw the strange silver mark curling across her collarbone like a frozen lightning bolt. "She shouldn't be allowed near the pack circle at all," muttered an older woman near the fence, pulling her daughter closer, as if Illyra's very presence might infect the child. "That mark is a warning from the moon spirits. Mark my words, that girl will bring nothing but ruin." Illyra had heard it all before. The whispers followed her everywhere, into the dining hall, through the training grounds, even into her dreams. Cursed, ruined, unwanted. She was 18 years old, and in 3 days, the Voss pack would hold the choosing ceremony, the ritual where every Omega of age was presented to potential mates. She already knew how it would end. She always knew. She limped toward the edge of the field, ignoring the snickers behind her, and pressed her palm against the mark on her collarbone. It never hurt, not physically, but sometimes she swore she could feel it pulse, like a second heartbeat trapped beneath her skin. No healer in the pack could explain it. No elder would even try. They simply called it a curse and moved on, leaving her to carry the weight of a mystery she never asked for. Illyra. She turned to see Clara jogging toward her, one of the only pack members who had never treated her like she carried some kind of disease. Clara was a beta, quick-witted and warm-hearted, and she had been Illyra's closest friend since they were children, back before the whispers grew too loud for most people to ignore. "You're bleeding," Clara said, wincing as she reached for a cloth in her satchel. "Garrick again?" "Garrick again," Illyra confirmed, letting her friend dab at the cut. "He wanted an audience. I gave him one. He's an idiot. Everyone knows it." Clara's eyes flicked toward the group of onlookers still whispering near the fence. "You know the choosing ceremony is in 3 days. Are you nervous?" Illyra almost laughed. Nervous wasn't the word for it. Dread sat in her stomach like a stone every time she thought about standing in front of the entire pack, while men looked her over and, one by one, rejected her. It had happened every year since she turned 16. This year would be no different, except this time, the elders had warned her that if no one chose her, she would be sent to the border settlements, far from her family, far from everything she knew. "I'll survive," Illyra said quietly. "I always do." Clara squeezed her hand, and for a moment, the warmth of that small gesture almost made the ache in Illyra's chest bearable. Almost. That night, Illyra sat alone in her small room at the edge of the pack house, staring at the mark on her collarbone in the mirror. It shimmered faintly in the candlelight, silver lines twisting like vines, beautiful in a way she had never allowed herself to admit. Beautiful and cursed. Two things that were never supposed to exist together. A knock came at her door. She expected Clara, but instead found her mother standing there, her face tight with worry. "The elders have called a meeting," her mother said. "Something has happened. An alpha is coming." Illyra frowned. "What alpha?" Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper, as if the walls themselves might carry the words too far. Cade Ashgrove. The name hit the air like a thunderclap. Even Illyra, who paid little attention to pack politics, knew that name. Everyone did. Cade Ashgrove was the alpha of the Ashgrove pack, the largest and most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. Stories about him spread through every pack like wildfire. Stories of battles won without a single loss, of enemies who surrendered before facing him, of a will so strong that even seasoned warriors trembled in his presence. He was young for an alpha of such power, yet no one, not even the oldest elders, dared question his authority. "Why would he come here?" Illyra asked, though a strange, unfamiliar flutter stirred in her chest. "An alliance," her mother said. "The elders believe he wants to strengthen ties between our packs before the coming winter. There are rumors of rogue wolves gathering in the northern woods. Cade Ashgrove does not take chances with threats like that." Illyra nodded slowly, though the news meant little to her personally. Alphas like Cade Ashgrove did not concern themselves with Omegas like her. He would arrive, hold his meetings, perhaps attend the choosing ceremony out of formality, and leave without ever noticing she existed. That was how it always was. She was invisible to men of importance, and for once, she found herself grateful for it. Better invisible than mocked. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. The pack house buzzed with activity, as servants cleaned every corner. Cooks prepared feasts fit for royalty, and warriors polished their armor until it gleamed. Elira watched it all from the shadows, feeling more like a ghost in her own home than ever before. On the morning of the choosing ceremony, Clara helped her dress in a simple gray gown, the only color the elders allowed Omegas of her standing to wear. No ribbons, no jewelry, nothing that might suggest she deserved attention. "You look lovely," Clara said, trying to sound cheerful despite the tension in the air. "I look like exactly what they want me to look like," Elira replied, forgettable. "That's not true," Clara insisted, though her voice wavered slightly. The ceremony hall was already crowded by the time Elira arrived, her stomach twisting into painful knots. Dozens of young Omegas stood in a line near the center of the room, each one dressed similarly, each one waiting to be chosen or dismissed. Elira took her place at the very end of the line, as she always did, the position reserved for those least likely to be selected. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and the entire room fell silent. Cade Ashgrove walked in like he owned the very air around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just above sharp gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore no crown, no elaborate robes, yet everyone in the room straightened instinctively, as if his presence alone commanded respect. Beside him walked 2 of his guards, but it was Cade who drew every eye, every breath. Elira had expected to feel nothing. She had expected him to be just another powerful man, passing through her small, insignificant life. Instead, something strange happened, the moment his gaze swept across the room. For the briefest second, his eyes paused on her, lingering just a heartbeat longer than they should have. Then he looked away, and the moment shattered, as if it had never happened at all. The ceremony began, and one by one, the Omegas ahead of her were presented, examined, and either chosen or dismissed by eligible pack members. Elira watched with growing dread as her turn crept closer, each rejection ahead of her a painful preview of her own fate. When her name was finally called, she stepped forward, chin lifted, despite the fear clawing at her chest. She scanned the room out of habit, though she already knew what would happen. "The cursed one," someone muttered from the crowd, just loud enough for her to hear. A young man named Dorian, the same boy who had rejected her the year before, stepped forward with a smirk. "I already made my choice clear last year. Nothing has changed." Laughter rippled through the hall. Elira kept her face still, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her flinch, though inside, she felt the familiar collapse of hope she had grown far too used to. "No one else?" The elder overseeing the ceremony asked the room, his voice heavy with practiced disappointment. "No claims for Elira Voss?" Silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "Very well," the elder said. "She will be sent to the border settlements at the next full moon." Elira felt the words land like a physical blow, though she had known this outcome was coming. She turned to walk back toward the line, refusing to let anyone see her cry, when a deep voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "Wait." Every head turned. Elira froze mid-step, her heart slamming against her ribs. Cade Ashgrove stood from his seat at the front of the hall, his sharp gray eyes fixed directly on her. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I would like to speak with her," he said simply, as if the request were the most ordinary thing in the world. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The elder overseeing the ceremony stammered, clearly caught off guard. "My lord, she carries the mark. Perhaps one of the other maidens would be more suitable for—" "I did not ask about the others," Cade interrupted, his voice calm but final. "I asked to speak with her." Elira's mind raced, panic and confusion tangled together in her chest. Why would the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories want anything to do with her? This had to be some kind of trick, or perhaps pity, though pity seemed unlikely coming from a man whose reputation suggested he felt little of it for anyone. The elder hesitated only a moment longer before nodding stiffly. "Of course, my lord. As you wish." Elira was led forward on unsteady legs, every eye in the room burning into her back. When she finally stood before Kate Ashgrove, she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to show the fear twisting inside her. Up close, he was even more intimidating than she had imagined. His eyes held a quiet intensity that seemed to see straight through her, past the mark, past the whispers, past everything she had built up to protect herself. "Your name," he said quietly, though it wasn't quite a question. "Illyra," she answered, keeping her voice steady, despite the way her pulse hammered in her throat. "Illyra Voss." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his gaze dropped briefly to the silver mark peeking above the collar of her gray gown, and something unreadable flickered behind his eyes. "I have heard many things about this mark," he said finally. Illyra's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. Another person about to recoil, to call her cursed, to confirm everything the pack had always told her about herself. Instead, Kate Ashgrove did something no one in the hall expected. He reached out, gently, and lightly touched 2 fingers to the edge of the mark, his expression unreadable, but far from disgust. "I do not believe in curses," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I believe in things people do not yet understand." The room around them buzzed with confusion and hushed murmurs, but Illyra barely heard any of it. She stood frozen, staring up at the one man in the entire Northern Territories who had never once looked at her like she was something to fear. For the first time in her life, someone had looked past the curse and seen her instead. She had no idea that this single moment would change the course of her entire existence. The whispers did not stop after the ceremony. If anything, they grew louder. By the next morning, the entire pack house buzzed with rumors about why the great Kate Ashgrove had paused, even for a moment, to speak with the cursed Omega girl. Some said it was pity. Others claimed it was some cruel joke meant to humiliate her further. Illyra heard every version as she walked through the halls, and she forced herself not to react to any of them. Maybe he wanted to see the curse up close. Garrick sneered as she passed him near the kitchens, like a rare animal in a cage. Illyra said nothing, though the words stung more than she wanted to admit. She had spent one entire night convincing herself that Kate Ashgrove's brief attention meant nothing. Powerful men did not linger on broken things. He had simply been curious, the way anyone might be curious about a strange creature they had never seen before. That was all it could have been. Clara found her later that day, practically bouncing with excitement as she pulled Illyra into an empty corridor. "Do you know what people are saying?" Clara whispered. "They say the Alpha specifically requested that you attend tonight's Alliance dinner." Illyra blinked. "That cannot be true." "It is true. My mother heard it directly from one of the elders. Apparently, Kate Ashgrove insisted on it before he would agree to continue any alliance discussions." Illyra's stomach twisted into a knot of confusion and dread. Why would he want her there? She was nobody, an Omega with a cursed mark and no standing in the pack. Surely there had been some mistake, some misunderstanding that would be corrected before the evening arrived. But when evening came, a servant arrived at her door, carrying a deep blue gown, far finer than anything Illyra had ever been permitted to wear. "Compliments of Alpha Ashgrove," the servant said, avoiding Illyra's eyes, as if even speaking to her directly might bring bad luck. "You are expected at the dinner within the hour." Illyra stared at the gown for a long moment, before slipping it on with trembling hands. The fabric was soft, a rich color that made her pale skin seem to glow, rather than fade into the background as she always tried to do. For the first time in years, she looked into the mirror and did not immediately search for flaws. The dining hall that evening was transformed, filled with warm candlelight and the low hum of important conversations. Illyra hovered near the entrance, uncertain where she was meant to sit, when a familiar deep voice spoke from just behind her. "You came." She turned to find Kate Ashgrove standing there, dressed in dark formal attire that somehow made him seem even more imposing than before. His gray eyes studied her carefully, though there was no mockery in his expression, no trace of the cruelty she had braced herself for. "I was told I had no choice," she admitted honestly. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. "Would you have come, if given the choice?" Illyra hesitated. The honest answer was complicated, tangled up in fear and curiosity, and something she did not yet have a name for. "I do not know," she said finally. "Fair enough. Cade replied, seeming genuinely satisfied with her honesty rather than offended by it. Come, sit near me. I would like to hear more about the border settlements you were meant to be sent to. Illyra followed him, painfully aware of every eye in the room tracking her movements. The other pack members whispered behind polite smiles, clearly baffled by the sudden and unprecedented attention the great Alpha was showing an Omega everyone had spent years dismissing. Throughout dinner, Cade asked her questions no one had ever bothered asking before. What did she enjoy doing when she was left alone? What she thought about the Northern Territories? Whether she had ever wished to travel beyond the borders of her own pack. Illyra found herself answering honestly, surprised by how easily the words came once someone actually seemed interested in hearing them. You are observant, Cade noted at one point, after she had made a sharp comment about the tension between two rival elders seated across the hall. Most people in this room are too busy performing politeness to notice what is actually happening around them. Being ignored gives a person plenty of time to watch everyone else, Illyra replied simply. Something shifted in his expression then. Something almost like respect. That is a rare gift, Illyra Voss. Most people mistake being unseen for being unimportant. Illyra did not know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded and returned to her meal, though her heart pounded strangely in her chest. Later that night, after the dinner concluded and most of the guests had retired, Illyra found herself unable to sleep. She wandered outside, toward the edge of the training field, the same field where Garrick had knocked her down just days before, and breathed in the cool night air, trying to steady her racing thoughts. A twig snapped somewhere near the tree line, and Illyra froze, her senses sharpening instinctively. Years of being the target of cruel pranks had taught her to stay alert, even in places that should have felt safe. You should not wander alone at night, came a familiar voice from the shadows. Illyra turned to find Cade emerging from beneath the trees, his expression unreadable in the darkness. I could say the same to you, she replied, surprising herself with the boldness of her own words. I am an Alpha, he said simply, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. Very little in these woods poses a threat to me. And yet here you are, wandering alone in the dark, Illyra pointed out. Cade actually smiled at that, a real smile that softened the sharp lines of his face. You are quick with words, for someone who spends so much time in silence. Illyra wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly self-conscious. Silence is safer. Perhaps, Cade said, stepping closer, though he kept a respectful distance between them. But silence also hides a great deal that deserves to be heard. They stood together in the quiet darkness for a long moment, the tension between them unfamiliar and strange, yet not entirely uncomfortable. Illyra found herself studying his face, searching for the cruelty or condescension she had expected from every powerful man she had ever encountered. She found none. Why did you request that I attend tonight? She finally asked, unable to hold the question back any longer. Cade considered her carefully before answering. Because everyone in that hall looked straight through you, as if you were invisible. I wanted to know why a room full of intelligent people would choose to overlook someone so clearly capable of holding her own. They call me cursed, Illyra said quietly. They have called me that since I was a child. I know, Cade said. I have heard the stories. I do not believe them. Why not? Illyra pressed, needing to understand the reasoning behind his unusual kindness. Everyone else does. Cade's expression grew serious, his gray eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Because fear often disguises itself as certainty. People fear what they do not understand, and rather than seeking answers, they invent stories to explain away their discomfort. Your mark is unusual, yes, but unusual does not mean cursed. Illyra did not know how to respond to such open, unguarded honesty. No one had ever spoken to her this way before, without pity, without mockery, without the careful distance people usually kept when forced to acknowledge her existence. You speak as though you already know what it means, she said carefully. Something flickered across Cade's face, there and gone so quickly that Illyra almost missed it. I have theories, he admitted. Nothing certain yet, but I intend to find out. Before Illyra could ask him to elaborate, a distant howl echoed through the forest, sharp and sudden. Cade's entire posture shifted instantly, his relaxed demeanor replaced by alert readiness. Stay close to the pack house tonight, he said, his voice suddenly firm with authority. That was not one of your pack's wolves. Rogue wolves? Elira asked, remembering her mother's earlier warning about threats gathering in the northern woods. Perhaps, Cade said, already scanning the tree line with sharp, focused eyes. I do not yet know their numbers or their intentions. Until I do, I would prefer you remain somewhere safe. Elira felt an unfamiliar flutter of concern, not for herself, but for him. And you? Will you be safe? Cade's gaze softened slightly at the question, as if surprised by her concern. I have survived far worse than a few rogue wolves in unfamiliar territory, he assured her. But I appreciate the concern. They walked back toward the pack house together in comfortable silence, the earlier tension between them replaced by something new, something neither of them fully understood yet. When they finally reached the entrance, Cade paused, turning to face her one final time. Thank you for tonight, he said quietly, for your honesty. Thank you for treating me like a person, Elira replied, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Cade's expression grew unexpectedly serious. You are far more than that, Elira Voss. I suspect you have always been far more than anyone in this pack ever allowed you to be. With that, he turned and disappeared back into the darkness of the training field, leaving Elira standing alone at the entrance, her heart pounding with confusion, curiosity, and the first fragile traces of hope she had allowed herself to feel in years. She had no idea that the howl in the distance was only the beginning of a much larger danger, one that would soon pull her and Cade Ashgrove together in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The trap snapped shut with a metal crunch that echoed through the trees, followed by a pained, guttural sound that made Elira's blood run cold. She had only meant to take a short walk to clear her head after another sleepless night, wandering farther from the pack house than she probably should have. But the moment she heard that sound, every instinct told her something was badly hurt, and she found herself running toward it before she could think better of it. She pushed through a thicket of low branches and stopped short at the sight before her. A massive gray wolf lay on its side, one back leg caught in an iron trap, clearly meant for something far smaller. Blood matted the fur around the wound, and the wolf's chest heaved with ragged, pained breaths. Elira's heart raced. Wolves in their shifted form were common in the northern territories, but wandering this close to Voss pack land without announcing themselves was unusual, unless the wolf was too injured to shift back and identify itself properly. Easy, she whispered, approaching slowly with her palms open. I am not going to hurt you. The wolf's eyes, a striking pale gray, locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed almost too sharp, too intelligent for an ordinary wolf. Elira felt a strange flicker of recognition, though she could not place why. She knelt carefully beside the trap, examining the mechanism. Her fingers trembled slightly as she worked the rusted metal, wincing in sympathy every time the wolf let out a low whimper of pain. This might hurt more before it gets better, she warned quietly. I need you to stay still. The wolf, remarkably, obeyed, going rigid and silent despite the obvious agony radiating from its wounded leg. Elira pressed down on the trap's release lever with all her strength, straining until her arms shook, and finally, the metal jaws sprung open with a sharp clatter. The wolf yelped and pulled its leg free, immediately collapsing back onto the forest floor, breathing heavily. Elira quickly tore a strip of fabric from the hem of her dress and pressed it gently against the wound, applying steady pressure the way she had once seen the pack healer do for injured warriors. You need proper care, she murmured, more to herself than to the wolf. This will not heal on its own. The wolf's pale gray eyes watched her carefully as she worked, an unusual calmness settling over the massive creature despite its obvious pain. Elira had never been particularly comfortable around wolves in their shifted form, not since childhood, yet something about this particular wolf did not frighten her the way she expected it to. I do not know who you are, she said softly, continuing to apply pressure to the wound, but you are lucky I decided to take a walk tonight. The wolf huffed, an oddly amused sound, and Elira found herself smiling, despite the tension of the situation. She stayed with the wolf for nearly an hour, tending to the wound as best she could with the limited supplies she carried, occasionally speaking softly, just to fill the silence between them. She told the wolf about her frustrations with the pack, about the whispers that followed her everywhere, about the strange encounter she'd had with Cade Ashgrove just days before. It felt easier somehow, confessing these things to a creature who could not judge her, could not spread rumors, could not reject her the way everyone else always did. He said he did not believe in curses, she admitted quietly, staring down at her hands. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. The wolf's ears flicked forward, as if listening intently, though Alira told herself she was simply imagining things. Eventually, the wolf pushed itself upright, testing its weight carefully on the injured leg. It seemed steadier now. The bleeding slowed considerably thanks to her makeshift bandage. It turned its head toward her, holding her gaze for a long, strange moment, before letting out a low, almost grateful sound. "You should rest before traveling far," Alira advised, though she suspected the wolf had no intention of staying in unfamiliar territory any longer than necessary. "But I hope you heal quickly." The wolf pressed its head briefly against her shoulder, a gesture so unexpectedly gentle that Alira's breath caught in her throat. Then, before she could react further, it turned and disappeared into the darkness of the forest, moving with surprising speed despite its injury. Alira sat alone in the clearing for several minutes afterward, staring at the spot where the wolf had vanished, an inexplicable warmth spreading through her chest. She could not explain why the encounter had affected her so deeply, but something about those pale gray eyes lingered in her mind long after she made her way back toward the pack house. The next morning, Alira arrived at the communal dining hall to find the entire pack buzzing with unusual tension. Warriors clustered near the entrance, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, while several elders moved briskly between rooms with worried expressions. "What happened?" Alira asked Clara, who was hovering near the edge of the commotion. "Alpha Ashgrove was attacked last night," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with concern. "Rogue wolves, apparently. He was injured, though not seriously, thank the moon. He is resting now." Alira's stomach dropped, an unsettling thought creeping into her mind. Injured how? "A trap, I heard," Clara said. "Caught his leg. He managed to shift back and make it to the pack house on his own, though he lost quite a bit of blood along the way." Alira felt the blood drain from her own face as the pieces clicked together with sudden, undeniable clarity. The gray wolf, the trap, the pale eyes that had felt strangely familiar. "Alira, are you all right?" Clara asked, noticing her friend's sudden paleness. "I need to see him," Alira said abruptly, already moving toward the healer's quarters before Clara could respond. The guards outside Cade's temporary quarters hesitated when Alira requested entry, clearly unsure whether an Omega held enough standing to see the injured Alpha. But before they could turn her away, Cade's deep voice called out from within. "Let her in." Alira stepped inside to find Cade seated on the edge of a cot, his injured leg wrapped in fresh bandages, his expression carefully composed despite the obvious discomfort. When his gray eyes met hers, something unreadable passed across his face. "You," he said quietly, once the guards had stepped outside and closed the door behind them. "It was you," Alira breathed, the realization settling fully into place now. "Last night, in the forest, that was you." Cade did not deny it. "I did not expect anyone to find me before I could handle the situation myself." "You could have told me," Alira said, equal parts confused and oddly hurt by the deception. "Why did you let me believe you were simply an ordinary wolf?" "Because in that moment, I was not the alpha of the Ashgrove pack," Cade said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "I was simply a wounded creature, grateful for someone's kindness. I did not want that moment complicated by titles or expectations." Alira crossed her arms, though the anger she tried to summon quickly faded into something far more complicated. "You spoke with me as if I were simply another person, not someone beneath your notice." "Because you are," Cade said firmly. "Far from beneath anyone's notice, Alira. If anything, last night proved exactly the opposite." Alira felt heat rising in her cheeks, unsure how to respond to such direct honesty. "The rogue wolves," she said instead, steering the conversation toward safer territory. "Do you know who sent them?" Cade's expression darkened slightly. "Not yet, but I intend to find out. This was no random encounter. That trap was placed deliberately, in a location clearly intended to catch someone specific." "You believe someone targeted you," Alira said, understanding dawning. "I believe someone within these northern territories does not wish to see an alliance between our packs succeed," Cade said grimly. "And I believe they will try again." A cold knot of fear settled in Alira's stomach, though she could not explain why the thought of Cade being in danger affected her so deeply. She barely knew him, and yet something about their strange, unexpected connection over the past few days had already carved out a place in her chest she did not know how to protect. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. Cade's gaze met hers, steady and resolute. "I will find whoever is responsible, and I will ensure they never threaten these lands again. But in the meantime, I need to ask something of you." "What is it?" "Stay close to the pack house," he said. "Whoever is behind this attack may not limit their targets to alphas alone. If they discover our connection, however small it may currently seem to others, they may see you as a way to reach me." Alira's breath caught at the implication of his words, the weight of what he was suggesting settling heavily over her. "You believe I am in danger because of you?" "I believe caution is wise," Cade said carefully. "I would not forgive myself if something happened to you because of my presence here." Something in his voice, some genuine concern layered beneath his careful composure, made Alira's chest tighten with an unfamiliar warmth. No one had ever expressed such protective concern for her safety before, not even her own family, who had long since grown weary of defending her against the pack's cruelty. "I will be careful," she promised quietly. Cade nodded, though the tension in his shoulders did not fully ease. "Thank you, Alira." As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her one final time. "For what it is worth," he said, "I am glad it was you who found me in that forest last night. Fate, it seems, has a strange sense of timing." Alira left his quarters, with her heart pounding, and her mind spinning with questions she did not yet have answers to. Whatever strange, dangerous forces were gathering in the Northern Territories, she now found herself unexpectedly tangled in their path, bound to a man whose very presence in her life defied everything she thought she understood about her own worth. She had no idea just how deep that danger would soon become, or how completely it would change the course of both their lives forever. The old book crumbled slightly at the edges as Cade turned each fragile page, his sharp gray eyes scanning line after line of faded, handwritten script. He had sent for the archive keeper the moment his leg had healed enough to walk without assistance, requesting every text the Ashgrove pack possessed on ancient markings and prophecy bonds. The archive keeper, an elderly man named Edwin who had served 3 generations of Ashgrove alphas, had raised an eyebrow at the unusual request, but said nothing, delivering a stack of dusty volumes to Cade's temporary quarters without question. Cade had spent the past 2 nights buried in these texts, driven by a restless need to understand the strange silver mark he had seen on Alira's collarbone. He told himself it was simple curiosity, a scholar's interest in an unexplained phenomenon. But deep down, he knew it was something more, something he was not yet ready to name. "Here," he murmured to himself, finding a passage that made his pulse quicken. The text was old, written in a dialect few pack scholars still understood fluently, describing markings passed down through bloodlines, said to belong to the earliest wolf packs, long before the modern territories had been established. According to the passage, certain markings appeared only on individuals destined to become fated mates of extraordinarily powerful alphas, bonds so rare that entire generations might pass without a single occurrence. The markings, the text explained, were often silver in color, appearing during childhood, and growing more pronounced as the individual approached the age when their fated bond would be revealed. Communities unfamiliar with such rare occurrences frequently misunderstood the markings, labeling them curses or bad omens simply because they lacked the knowledge to recognize them for what they truly were. Cade sat back slowly, his mind racing. Everything matched. The timing of Alira's mark appearing in childhood, its silver coloring, the very shape and pattern, which the text described almost exactly. If this ancient record held any truth, then Alira Voss was not cursed at all. She was something far rarer, far more significant than anyone in her pack had ever imagined. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Edwin entered quietly, carrying a fresh pot of tea. "You have not slept much these past 2 nights, my lord," the old man observed carefully. "I have found something important," Cade said, gesturing toward the open book. "Tell me, Edwin, have you ever encountered records of fated bonds marked by unusual physical signs?" Edwin's expression grew thoughtful as he studied the passage Cade indicated.
"I have heard old stories, though I always assumed them to be myths passed down for entertainment rather than historical fact."
"Why do you ask, my lord?" Cade hesitated, unsure how much he wished to reveal, even to someone as trusted as Edwin. I believe I may have encountered someone bearing such a mark. Edwin's eyebrows rose sharply. If that is true, my lord, then the implications would be significant indeed. Fated bonds of that nature were said to hold power beyond ordinary mate bonds, capable of uniting bloodlines and, in some accounts, ending long-standing conflicts between rival packs. Do you believe such bonds still exist in this era? Cade asked. I could not say for certain, Edwin admitted. Such occurrences were rare even in the ancient texts, but if you have reason to believe you have found evidence of one, I would advise proceeding carefully. Bonds of that significance rarely go unnoticed, and not everyone would welcome such news. Cade considered Edwin's words carefully, understanding the deeper warning embedded within them. If Elira truly carried the mark of a fated bond, particularly one connected to him, certain individuals within both packs might see the revelation as a threat rather than a cause for celebration, especially those who had built their influence around maintaining traditional alliances and expectations. I intend to learn more before revealing anything, Cade said finally. Elira deserves to understand her own significance before politics and ambition complicate matters further. Edwin nodded approvingly. A wise approach, my lord. May I ask, if such a bond does exist between you and this young woman, how do you intend to proceed? Cade's gaze drifted toward the window, his thoughts settling on the memory of Elira kneeling beside him in the forest, tending his wound without hesitation, despite believing him to be nothing more than an ordinary, injured wolf. Her kindness had been genuine, untainted by any awareness of his status or power. Slowly, Cade said quietly, she has spent her entire life being rejected and dismissed by people who never took the time to truly see her. I will not make the same mistake others have made. Whatever exists between us, I want her to discover it because she trusts me, not because ancient texts or prophecy demand it. Edwin smiled faintly, a rare expression from the normally reserved archive keeper. A noble approach, my lord, though I suspect patience may prove challenging given the circumstances currently unfolding within these territories. Cade's expression sobered instantly, remembering the rogue wolves and the deliberate trap that had injured him just days before. The threat against the Alliance remains a concern, he agreed. If someone discovers Elira's significance before we fully understand it ourselves, she could become a target far more dangerous than anything she has faced within her own pack. Then perhaps it would be wise to increase her protection discreetly, Edwin suggested. Without revealing the true reason behind such measures, of course. Cade nodded, already forming a plan in his mind. He would need to move carefully, balancing his growing need to protect Elira with his desire to allow their connection to develop naturally, free from the pressures of prophecy and political maneuvering. Later that afternoon, Cade found Elira near the Packhouse Gardens, sitting quietly beneath a large oak tree with a book resting unopened in her lap. She seemed lost in thought, her expression distant and troubled. You seem preoccupied, Cade observed, settling onto the bench beside her, careful to keep a respectful distance. Elira glanced up, startled slightly by his sudden presence. I did not hear you approach. A rare occurrence, given how alert you usually are, Cade noted with a faint smile. Something troubling you? Elira hesitated before answering, clearly weighing how much to share. The Pack Council held another meeting this morning, she said finally. They discussed sending me to the border settlements sooner than originally planned, given the recent danger surrounding the rogue wolf attacks. They believe my continued presence here poses unnecessary complications. Cade's jaw tightened at the news, though he kept his expression carefully neutral. And how do you feel about that? Relieved, in some ways, Elira admitted honestly. The border settlements would at least offer a fresh start, somewhere I am not immediately recognized as the cursed Omega everyone whispers about. And in other ways, Cade pressed gently. Elira's gaze dropped to her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. In other ways, it feels like running from a problem rather than solving it. I have spent my entire life being pushed toward the margins, sent away, hidden from view. Part of me wonders what it would feel like to actually belong somewhere, rather than simply being tolerated until I become too inconvenient. Cade's chest tightened at the quiet vulnerability in her words, a vulnerability she rarely allowed others to witness. You deserve far more than mere tolerance, Elira, he said firmly. You deserve to belong somewhere that recognizes your true worth. Elira glanced up at him, uncertainty flickering across her expression. You keep saying things like that, Cade. Things no one has ever said to me before. I do not understand why. Cade held her gaze steadily, choosing his words with careful deliberation. Because I have come to believe you are far more significant than anyone in this pack has ever allowed themselves to see. Significant how? Alira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cade hesitated, torn between his desire for complete honesty and his promise to himself to allow their connection to unfold naturally, without the weight of ancient prophecy pressing down upon it too soon. I am still learning the answer to that question myself, he said finally, which was, in its own way, entirely true. But I intend to find out, Alira, and when I do, I promise you will be the first to know. Alira studied him for a long moment, clearly sensing there was more beneath his careful words than he was willing to reveal just yet. But rather than pressing further, she simply nodded, a small, tentative trust settling between them. Until then, Cade continued, I would ask that you delay any decision regarding the border settlements, at least until the current threat against the Alliance has been resolved. Why does that matter to you? Alira asked. Cade's answer came without hesitation, surprising even himself with its honesty. Because the thought of you leaving before I have the chance to understand what exists between us troubles me far more than I expected it to. The garden fell silent around them, the weight of his words settling heavily in the space between their hearts. Alira did not respond immediately, but the faint blush coloring her cheeks told Cade everything he needed to know. Whatever ancient prophecy existed surrounding her mark, whatever destiny the old texts hinted at, Cade found himself caring more about the woman sitting beside him than any grand fated purpose. And for the first time since discovering the truth hidden within those crumbling pages, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps destiny and genuine affection were not mutually exclusive after all. Neither of them noticed the shadowed figure watching from the far edge of the garden, nor did they realize how quickly the danger surrounding them was about to escalate. You spend a great deal of time with the cursed girl these days, Dorian remarked one afternoon, his tone deceptively casual as he fell into step beside Cade near the training grounds. Cade did not slow his pace, though his jaw tightened slightly at the deliberate provocation in Dorian's voice. Her name is Alira, he said evenly, and what I choose to do with my time is not a matter requiring your input. Dorian smirked, clearly unbothered by the subtle warning in Cade's tone. Forgive me, my lord. I only mention it because others have noticed as well. Quite a few, actually. It seems unusual for a man of your standing to show such interest in someone so widely regarded as bad fortune. Perhaps those spreading such regard simply lack the wisdom to recognize actual worth, Cade replied coolly, finally stopping to fix Dorian with a level, unimpressed stare. Was there something specific you wished to discuss, or merely idle gossip you felt compelled to share? Dorian's smirk faltered slightly under the weight of Cade's gaze, though he recovered quickly. Merely concern, my lord. For the reputation of both packs, given the sensitive nature of our current alliance discussions. Noted, Cade said flatly, before turning and walking away without further comment. Word of the exchange spread quickly through the pack house, as gossip always did, and by evening, Alira found herself the subject of even more pointed whispers than usual. She sat quietly during the communal dinner, keeping her eyes on her plate, trying to ignore the sideways glances and hushed conversations happening just within earshot. Do you suppose the Alpha simply feels sorry for her? One voice murmured from a nearby table. Or perhaps he intends some kind of joke, another suggested. Powerful men sometimes enjoy toying with those beneath them. Alira's fingers tightened around her fork, though she forced herself to remain composed. She had endured worse whispers throughout her life, and she refused to let these particular comments unravel the fragile confidence Cade's kindness had slowly begun building within her. Still, doubt crept in despite her best efforts to resist it. What if the whispers held some truth? What if Cade's attention truly was born from pity, or worse, some cruel game she simply had not yet uncovered? She had been burned too many times by false kindness to fully trust that this situation might be different. After dinner, Alira retreated to the quiet solitude of the pack library, seeking refuge from the watchful eyes and hushed judgments that seemed to follow her everywhere lately. She settled into a secluded corner, with a book she had no real intention of reading, simply grateful for the momentary peace. There you are. She looked up to find Cade standing at the entrance of the library, his expression unusually tense. Is something wrong? She asked, setting the book aside. I wanted to speak with you about something Dorian said earlier. Cade began, moving to sit across from her. I imagine you may have heard some version of it already, given how quickly rumors seem to travel within these walls. Alira's cheeks warmed slightly with embarrassment. I have heard enough, she admitted. People believe you are either pitying me or mocking me. I confess, I am not entirely certain which possibility troubles me more. Cade's expression softened, though frustration flickered briefly across his features. Neither is true, Alira. I need you to understand that clearly. Then why? Alira asked, finally voicing the question that had been quietly gnawing at her for days. Why does someone like you spend so much time and attention on someone like me? I am not foolish enough to believe it is simple coincidence. Cade hesitated, clearly weighing how much honesty the moment could bear, because from the very first moment I saw you, something about you captured my attention, in a way I have never experienced before. I cannot yet explain it fully, not in a way that would make complete sense to you, but I promise you, Alira, my interest in you has nothing to do with pity, and even less to do with cruelty. Alira studied him carefully, searching his expression for any sign of deception, any hint of the manipulation she had learned to recognize from years of being the target of cruel jokes. She found none. I want to believe you, she admitted quietly. But trusting kindness has never been easy for me. Every time someone has shown me even the smallest bit of attention throughout my life, it has eventually turned into disappointment or humiliation. Cade's expression grew serious, his gray eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. I cannot undo the pain others have caused you, Alira, but I can promise you this: whatever exists between us, I will not treat it carelessly. You deserve far better than the treatment you have received from this pack, and I intend to prove that, through my actions, not simply my words. A heavy silence settled between them, filled with unspoken vulnerability neither of them quite knew how to navigate. Finally, Alira spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. The border settlement offer still stands, she said. Part of me wonders if leaving would simply be easier, for both of us. Easier, perhaps, Cade agreed, but not necessarily better. I would ask you to stay, Alira, not because ancient obligation or pack politics demand it, but because I genuinely wish to understand what exists between us before you disappear from my life entirely. Alira's breath caught at the raw honesty in his words. No one had ever asked her to stay before, not with such genuine sincerity. Every departure throughout her life had been met with quiet relief from those around her, as if her absence were somehow a gift to the pack rather than a loss. I will consider staying, she said finally, unable to fully commit despite the warmth spreading through her chest at his words. But I need time, Cade. Time to understand my own feelings, separate from everyone else's expectations and judgments. Take all the time you need, Cade said gently. I am not asking for immediate certainty, Alira, only the chance to continue discovering whatever this is, together. Over the following days, their conversations grew increasingly frequent, though always careful to remain discreet given the constant scrutiny surrounding them. They met in quiet corners of the pack house, shared meals away from prying eyes, and slowly, cautiously, Alira allowed herself to trust the growing warmth blooming steadily within her chest. Yet despite this fragile happiness, an undercurrent of tension continued building throughout the pack house. Reports of rogue wolf activity increased along the northern borders, and whispers of potential threats against the Alliance grew louder with each passing day. Cade spent increasing amounts of time in strategy meetings with pack warriors, his expression growing more troubled with every report delivered. The situation is worsening, Clara confided to Alira one evening, her voice hushed with concern. My father overheard the warriors discussing increased rogue activity just beyond our borders. They believe an attack may be coming soon. Alira's stomach twisted with dread, memories of the trap that had injured Cade resurfacing sharply in her mind. Do they know who is responsible? Not yet, Clara admitted. But whoever it is seems determined to prevent the alliance between our packs from succeeding. That evening, Alira sought Cade out, finding him standing alone near the edge of the training field, his expression heavy with unspoken worry as he stared toward the darkened tree line. You are troubled, she observed quietly, coming to stand beside him. The rogue wolves grow bolder, Cade admitted. I fear they are preparing for something larger than isolated attacks. If they strike again, I worry the consequences may extend beyond simple injury. Illyra felt a chill settle over her, despite the warm evening air. What will you do? Whatever is necessary to protect this alliance, Cade said firmly, and everyone within it. He turned to face her fully then, his gray eyes holding an intensity that made her breath catch. Including you, Illyra. Especially you. Illyra did not know how to respond to the fierce protectiveness radiating from him, though something warm and unfamiliar bloomed within her chest at his words. Whatever danger lay ahead, she realized with quiet clarity. She no longer wished to face it from the safety of the border settlements, far removed from the man who had somehow, against every expectation she once held, become important to her. Then let us face it together, she said quietly. Cade's expression softened into something achingly tender, and for a brief moment, the weight of the looming danger faded into the background, replaced instead by the fragile, growing bond steadily forming between them. Neither of them could have predicted just how soon that bond would be tested, nor how close they would come to losing everything before it had truly even begun. The candlelight flickered violently as the doors of the great hall burst open, and chaos erupted before anyone fully understood what was happening. The diplomatic dinner between the Voss and Ashgrove packs had been proceeding smoothly, filled with careful conversation and the fragile beginnings of genuine cooperation between the two groups. Illyra sat near Cade at the head table, close enough to notice the subtle tension still lingering in his shoulders, despite his outwardly composed demeanor. Then, without warning, the temperature in the room seemed to shift, and Illyra's heightened omega senses prickled with sudden, unmistakable alarm. Something is wrong, she whispered urgently, gripping Cade's arm. Cade turned to her, his expression sharpening instantly at the genuine alarm in her voice. Before he could respond, the hall's side entrance burst open, and several unfamiliar wolves surged into the room, their intentions unmistakably hostile. Panic erupted throughout the hall as pack members scrambled away from the intruders, warriors from both packs rushing forward to intercept the threat. Cade rose immediately, positioning himself protectively as chaos swirled around them, his authoritative voice cutting through the panic as he issued rapid commands to his warriors. Illyra's heart pounded as she watched the scene unfold, her senses screaming with warning she could not fully explain. Then, through the chaos, she caught sight of movement near the shadowed edge of the hall, a lone figure raising a weapon aimed directly at Cade's exposed back, while his attention remained fixed on directing his warriors toward the main threat. "Cade!" she screamed, already moving before conscious thought fully registered. She threw herself forward, pushing him aside with every ounce of strength she possessed. The impact sent them both stumbling, and Illyra felt a sharp, searing pain lance through her shoulder as the attack meant for Cade struck her instead. "Illyra." Cade's voice broke with raw panic as he caught her, before she could collapse fully to the floor, his hands immediately pressing against the wound, his expression twisted with fear, unlike anything Illyra had ever witnessed from him. "I am all right," she managed, though the pain radiating through her shoulder suggested otherwise. "You need to. Do not speak," Cade commanded, though his voice trembled with barely restrained emotion. "Stay with me, Illyra. Stay awake." Around them, the remaining warriors quickly overwhelmed the intruders, subduing them before they could cause further harm. But Cade barely registered the resolution of the immediate threat, his entire focus consumed by the woman bleeding in his arms. Something shifted within him then, a fierce, protective fury unlike anything he had ever allowed himself to fully unleash. His eyes darkened, power radiating from him in waves so intense that every remaining person in the hall instinctively stepped back, sensing the sheer force of his barely contained emotion. "Get the healer," he growled, his voice carrying an authority that sent servants scrambling instantly to obey. Now. The healer arrived within moments, quickly assessing Illyra's wound, while Cade remained close by, refusing to release his grip on her hand, even as the healer worked. His expression remained fierce, protective, utterly unlike the composed alpha everyone in the room had grown accustomed to seeing. "The wound is serious, but not life-threatening," the healer finally announced, carefully cleaning and bandaging Illyra's injured shoulder. "She will need rest, but she should recover fully with proper care." Relief flooded through Cade so intensely that his shoulders sagged slightly, the fierce tension finally beginning to ease now that immediate danger had passed. He looked down at Illyra, who watched him with pained but steady eyes. "You should not have done that," he said quietly, though gratitude and lingering fear colored his voice far more than anger. "I could not simply stand by and watch," Elira replied weakly. "Not when I could prevent it." Cade's jaw tightened, emotion clearly warring within him. "You could have been killed, Elira. Do you understand that?" "So could you," she countered softly. "I made my choice, Cade. I do not regret it." Cade stared down at her for a long moment, something profound shifting behind his gray eyes. Whatever careful restraint he had maintained throughout their growing connection seemed to shatter entirely in that moment, replaced by an overwhelming certainty he could no longer deny or delay acknowledging. "I cannot lose you," he said quietly, his voice raw with emotion he had never allowed himself to express so openly before. "Not now, not ever." The words hung heavily in the air between them, carrying a weight far beyond simple concern or gratitude. Elira's breath caught as she studied his expression, recognizing something profound and undeniable reflected there. Throughout the following hours, as the pack worked to secure the hall and question the captured intruders, Cade remained steadfastly at Elira's side, refusing every suggestion that he attend to other pressing matters until he was fully certain of her recovery. His warriors exchanged uncertain glances at this unprecedented display of devotion from an alpha renowned throughout the Northern Territories for his composed, unwavering focus on duty above all else. "My lord," one of his senior warriors finally ventured carefully, "the captured wolves are ready for questioning. Shall we proceed?" Cade's expression hardened instantly, the fierce protectiveness he had shown toward Elira transforming into cold, determined resolve. "I will handle this personally," he said, though he hesitated, clearly torn between his need to address the threat and his reluctance to leave Elira's side. "Go," Elira urged gently, squeezing his hand despite the lingering pain in her shoulder. "I will be fine here. This needs to end, Cade, before anyone else gets hurt." Cade studied her carefully, searching for any sign of hesitation in her words. Finding none, he finally nodded, though he pressed a gentle kiss against her uninjured hand before rising to address the captured threat. The questioning revealed troubling information. The intruders, rogue wolves from a splinter faction opposed to any alliance between established northern packs, had been specifically instructed to target Cade Ashgrove, believing his elimination would collapse the fragile cooperation forming between the Voss and Ashgrove territories. They had been watching the pack house for days, waiting for an opportunity to strike when his guard would be lowest. News of Elira's brave intervention spread rapidly throughout both packs following the attack, and the whispers that had once mocked and dismissed her as cursed shifted dramatically overnight. Pack members who had once avoided her presence now spoke of her in hushed, respectful tones, recognizing the extraordinary courage she had displayed in protecting an alpha of Cade's standing. Even Dorian, who had mocked her so cruelly during the choosing ceremony, found himself unable to meet her eyes when their paths crossed in the following days, clearly humbled by the stark contrast between his own dismissive treatment of her and the fierce loyalty she had shown toward Cade despite everyone's expectations. As Elira slowly recovered over the following days, resting in a private chamber within the pack house, Cade visited frequently, their conversations growing deeper and more vulnerable with each passing hour. The careful walls Elira had built around her heart throughout years of rejection began crumbling steadily beneath the weight of his unwavering devotion. "Everyone keeps saying I saved your life," Elira remarked one afternoon, watching Cade settle into the chair beside her bed. "You did," Cade said simply, without hesitation, without concern for your own safety. "I did not think about it at all," Elira admitted honestly. "I simply acted." Cade reached out, gently taking her uninjured hand in his. "That instinct, Elira, that willingness to protect me without a moment's hesitation, tells me everything I need to understand about what exists between us." Elira's heart raced at the intensity in his gaze, sensing the significance building steadily beneath his words. "What are you saying, Cade?" Cade drew a steadying breath, clearly preparing to reveal something he had carefully guarded until this exact moment. "I am saying that I no longer wish to keep secrets from you, Elira. Not about my feelings, and not about what I have discovered regarding your mark." Elira's breath caught, uncertain and curious in equal measure about what revelation awaited her. Whatever answers Cade had been quietly seeking these past days, she sensed instinctively that everything between them was about to change irreversibly. Elira sat up slowly in her bed, wincing slightly at the lingering ache in her shoulder, her full attention fixed on Cade, as he prepared to share whatever truth he had been carefully withholding. "What have you discovered?" she asked, her voice steady, despite the nervous flutter building in her chest. Cade reached into the pocket of his coat and produced a small, worn journal, its pages marked with careful notes in his own handwriting. "After our first meeting, I could not stop thinking about your mark," he began. "I requested every ancient text my pack's archive possessed, searching for any explanation beyond the superstition your pack has attached to it." "And what did you find?" Illyra pressed, her heart pounding. "According to the oldest records," Cade continued, "markings like yours are not curses at all. They are signs of an extraordinarily rare fated bond, one said to occur between individuals destined to unite powerful bloodlines. The mark grows more pronounced as the individual approaches the moment when this bond will reveal itself." Illyra stared at him, stunned into silence. "You believe my mark signifies a fated bond?" "I believe it signifies far more than the pack elders have ever understood," Cade said carefully. "And I believe, Illyra, that bond may exist between us." The room fell utterly silent, the weight of his words settling heavily over both of them. Illyra's mind raced, memories of years spent being shunned and rejected, clashing violently against this unexpected, almost unbelievable revelation. "How can you be certain?" she finally whispered. "I cannot be entirely certain," Cade admitted honestly. "The ancient texts are incomplete, and such bonds have become so rare that even the most learned scholars possess only fragments of understanding regarding them. But everything I have witnessed between us, from the moment I first saw you, feels far too significant to be simple coincidence." Illyra's hand drifted unconsciously to the silver mark on her collarbone, the same mark that had brought her nothing but pain and isolation throughout her entire life. "If this is true," she said slowly, "why has no one within my own pack ever recognized it?" "Fear often blinds people to truths they do not wish to understand," Cade said gently. "Your pack elders likely never encountered such a bond before, and rather than seeking knowledge, they chose the easier path of superstition and rejection." Tears welled unexpectedly in Illyra's eyes, decades of pain and confusion, finally finding a possible explanation that had nothing to do with curses or bad fortune. "All this time," she whispered, "I believed something was wrong with me, that I carried some terrible flaw that made me unworthy of belonging anywhere." Cade moved closer, gently cupping her face in his hands, his gray eyes filled with fierce tenderness. "There is nothing wrong with you, Illyra. There never has been. If anything, you have carried something extraordinarily rare within you your entire life, and this pack was simply too ignorant to recognize its true significance." Illyra leaned into his touch, allowing herself, for the first time in years, to fully embrace comfort without immediately questioning its authenticity. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Cade drew back slightly, his expression growing resolute. "Now, I intend to make my intentions known, publicly and without hesitation. I will not allow ancient prophecy or pack politics to dictate the terms of our bond, Illyra. But I also will not allow this pack to continue treating you with anything less than the respect you deserve." Before Illyra could respond, Cade rose from his seat, moving toward the door with sudden, determined purpose. "Cade, wait," she began, uncertain what he intended. "Trust me," he said simply, before disappearing through the doorway. Word spread rapidly throughout the pack house that Cade Ashgrove had called an urgent gathering within the main hall, requesting the presence of both pack councils along with every available member of the Voss and Ashgrove packs. Confused murmurs filled the hall as people gathered, uncertain what could warrant such an unprecedented and immediate assembly. Illyra, still recovering from her injury, arrived leaning slightly on Clara's supportive arm, uncertain exactly what Cade intended to reveal, but sensing the profound significance of the moment, building steadily around her. Cade stood at the front of the hall, his presence commanding immediate silence and attention from everyone gathered. His gray eyes swept across the crowd before settling firmly on Illyra as she made her way toward the front. "I called this gathering," Cade began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "because I have remained quiet about something important for far too long, out of respect for allowing this matter to develop naturally. But recent events have made it clear that such patience is no longer wise, nor necessary." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, confusion evident on every face. Illyra's heart pounded as she watched Cade, uncertain exactly what he intended to say. Many of you have questioned my attention toward Alira Voss these past weeks, Cade continued, his gaze never leaving her face. Some have called it pity. Others have suggested cruelty or manipulation. I stand before you today to correct these assumptions entirely. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Alira until he stood directly before her, the entire hall watching in stunned silence. Alira Voss carries a mark this pack has wrongly called a curse for her entire life, Cade said, his voice ringing with fierce conviction. In truth, that mark identifies her as my fated mate, a bond so rare that generations may pass without a single occurrence. She is not cursed. She has never been cursed. She has been misunderstood by those too fearful or too ignorant to recognize the truth. Gasps echoed throughout the hall, disbelief and shock rippling across every face present. Alira stood frozen, overwhelmed by the public nature of Cade's declaration, her heart racing, with a complicated mixture of vulnerability and dawning hope. Then, before the stunned silence could fully settle, Cade did something no one in that hall had ever witnessed from an alpha of his standing. He knelt, slowly, deliberately, in full view of both packs. Cade Ashgrove lowered himself onto one knee, before Alira Voss, the woman who had spent her entire life being rejected and dismissed by everyone around her. Alira Voss, he said, his voice steady, despite the profound vulnerability of the gesture. I do not kneel easily, nor have I ever knelt before another living soul, but I kneel before you now, not out of obligation or ancient prophecy, but because you have shown me courage, kindness, and strength, unlike anything I have encountered in my entire life. You saved my life without hesitation. You looked past my title to see the person beneath it, just as I have always seen the person beneath your mark. The hall remained utterly silent, every eye fixed on the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. Alira felt tears welling in her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight and sincerity of his words. I claim you, Alira Voss, Cade continued, not because prophecy demands it, but because my heart recognizes what my mind confirmed through ancient texts. You are my fated mate, and I intend to honor that bond for the rest of my life, if you will allow me the privilege. Silence stretched for a long, breathless moment, before Alira, tears streaming freely down her cheeks, finally found her voice. All my life, she said softly, though her voice carried clearly through the silent hall, I believed I was unworthy of belonging anywhere. I believed the curse everyone spoke of was real, that something broken within me made me unlovable. She reached down, gently taking Cade's hands in hers, urging him to rise. But you looked past everything this pack ever told me about myself, and you saw someone worth kneeling for. I do not yet fully understand everything this bond means, Cade, but I know that whatever it means, I want to discover it with you. The hall erupted into a mixture of stunned murmurs and cautious applause, though Alira barely registered the reaction of those around her, entirely focused on the man before her, whose gray eyes reflected such fierce devotion that it stole the breath from her lungs. Yet even amid this profound, unexpected moment of triumph, Alira noticed several elders exchanging troubled, calculating glances near the back of the hall, their expressions suggesting that not everyone present welcomed this unprecedented declaration with open acceptance. Whatever peace this moment offered, she sensed instinctively that greater challenges still awaited them both. The days following Cade's public declaration should have felt like a triumph, yet Alira found herself struggling beneath a weight she had not expected. Everywhere she walked, pack members who had once ignored or mocked her now offered careful, deferential nods, their expressions a strange mixture of respect and lingering uncertainty. The abrupt shift felt disorienting, almost dishonest, as though the same people who had spent years dismissing her worth now scrambled to align themselves with whatever favor Cade's attention might bring them. They do not truly respect me, Alira confided to Clara one evening, sitting together in the quiet solitude of the garden. They respect Cade's claim. There is a difference. Perhaps, Clara said gently, but give it time, Alira. People often need proof before they change their hearts, not simply their words. Alira nodded, though doubt continued gnawing quietly at her confidence. She had spent her entire life building walls to protect herself from disappointment, and those walls did not simply crumble overnight, regardless of how sincere Cade's devotion appeared to be. That evening, Cade found her sitting alone, near the edge of the training field, her expression distant and troubled. He settled beside her without a word, giving her space to speak when she felt ready. I keep waiting for this to disappear, Elira finally admitted. For you to realize I am not truly what the prophecy suggests. For this pack to remember why they called me cursed in the first place. Cade's expression softened with quiet understanding. You are testing whether my devotion is real, he observed gently, waiting for the moment it inevitably fades, the way every other kindness in your life eventually has. Elira looked away, embarrassed by how easily he had recognized her fear. I do not know how to simply trust something good, Cade. I never learned how. Then allow me to teach you, Cade said simply. Not through words alone, but through actions you can rely upon, day after day, until trust becomes something you no longer need to question. Over the following weeks, Cade proved true to his word. He remained steadfastly by her side, through every pack function, defending her without hesitation whenever old prejudices resurfaced, and patiently reassuring her whenever old fears crept back into her thoughts. Yet despite his unwavering consistency, Elira continued struggling internally, old wounds resurfacing in unexpected moments. One afternoon, during a pack gathering meant to celebrate the newly formed alliance, Elira overheard several elders whispering near the refreshment table, unaware of her presence just beyond the garden hedge. The Alpha's judgment concerns me, one elder murmured. Bonding himself to an Omega with such an unusual history seems reckless, regardless of what ancient prophecy suggests. Agreed, another voice replied. Perhaps once the alliance is fully secured, wiser counsel will prevail regarding more suitable arrangements for the Ashgrove bloodline. Elira froze, her chest tightening painfully at the overheard conversation. Despite Cade's public declaration, despite the ancient prophecy confirming their bond, some among the pack elders still viewed her as unworthy, a temporary arrangement rather than a genuine, lasting choice. That evening, she withdrew from Cade's company, retreating instead to her private chamber, unable to fully articulate the resurfacing doubt weighing so heavily upon her heart. When Cade came searching for her, concern evident in his expression, she found herself pulling further away, rather than confiding in him. Something is troubling you, Cade said carefully, settling beside her. You have grown distant these past few days. I am simply tired, Elira replied, though the deflection felt hollow even to her own ears. Cade studied her carefully, clearly unconvinced. Elira, please. Whatever this is, allow me to help carry the weight of it. Elira hesitated, torn between her instinct to withdraw and her growing trust in the man before her. Finally she relented, recounting the conversation she had overheard among the elders. Cade's expression darkened with quiet anger. Their opinions do not determine the validity of our bond, Elira. Perhaps not, she said softly, but they determine how welcome I will ever truly feel within either pack. I fear becoming a permanent source of division, rather than the unity this bond was supposedly destined to bring. Cade reached for her hands, holding them firmly within his own. Then we will prove them wrong together, not through grand declarations alone, but through steady, consistent actions that leave no room for doubt regarding your worth or our commitment to one another. Elira studied his face carefully, searching for any hesitation, any sign that his patience might eventually wear thin beneath the weight of her lingering insecurities. She found none, only the same unwavering devotion that had steadily begun rebuilding the fragile trust she had long ago abandoned hope of ever experiencing. I want to believe this will last, she admitted quietly. I am simply afraid of what happens if it does not. Then let me remove that fear, piece by piece, for as long as it takes, Cade said firmly. I am not going anywhere, Elira. Not because prophecy demands my loyalty, but because I choose you, every single day, regardless of what challenges we face. Slowly, over the following weeks, Elira allowed herself to lean further into the security Cade consistently offered. She began attending pack functions with growing confidence, addressing lingering doubts directly, rather than retreating into old patterns of self-protection. When elders questioned her worthiness, she met their skepticism with calm, steady resolve, rather than the quiet shame she once would have felt. A turning point arrived when a delegation from a distant northern territory arrived to formally recognize the growing alliance between the Voss and Ashgrove packs. During the formal reception, one visiting elder openly questioned the wisdom of bonding an Alpha of Cade's standing to an Omega previously dismissed as cursed by her own pack. Before Cade could respond, Elira stepped forward herself, addressing the visiting elder directly. "I understand your hesitation," she said calmly, though her voice carried unmistakable strength. "For years, I believed the same doubts about myself that you currently voice. But I have learned that worth is not determined by inherited prejudice or superstition. It is determined by character, by action, and by the willingness to stand firm despite adversity. I have proven my loyalty to this alliance through action, not simply words. I would ask that you judge me accordingly." The visiting elder studied her for a long moment before offering a respectful, if somewhat surprised, nod. "Well spoken," he acknowledged. "Perhaps there is more substance to this bond than mere prophecy after all." Cade watched with quiet pride as Elira handled the exchange with newfound confidence, recognizing the significant transformation steadily unfolding within her. The frightened, self-doubting young woman he had first encountered during the choosing ceremony was gradually being replaced by someone increasingly secure in her own worth, regardless of what others chose to believe. That evening, as they walked together through the quiet gardens, Elira finally allowed herself to voice the shift she felt within her own heart. "I think," she said slowly, "I am finally beginning to believe this is real. Not because the prophecy says so, but because you have shown me, again and again, that your devotion does not waver." Cade stopped walking, turning to face her fully, his expression filled with quiet joy. "That is all I have ever wanted you to understand, Elira. This bond may have been foretold by ancient prophecy, but the love steadily growing between us is entirely our own." For the first time in her life, Elira allowed herself to fully believe those words, standing taller and more secure in her own worth than she had ever imagined possible. Yet even as this newfound confidence bloomed within her, larger revelations regarding her true significance to both packs still waited patiently on the horizon, ready to reshape her understanding of herself entirely. Edwin arrived at the pack house unannounced one morning, carrying an ancient scroll so fragile that he handled it as though it might disintegrate at the slightest careless touch. "My lord," he said urgently, requesting immediate audience with Cade, "I believe I have found something significant regarding the prophecy surrounding Elira's mark. Something far greater than what we previously understood." Cade summoned Elira immediately, sensing the importance of Edwin's discovery. They gathered in Cade's private study, where Edwin carefully unrolled the ancient scroll across the table, his weathered hands trembling slightly with barely contained excitement. "This scroll," Edwin explained, "was recovered from the deepest archive vault, sealed away for generations due to its fragile condition. It describes, in far greater detail than the texts we previously examined, the true significance of markings such as Elira's." Elira leaned forward, her heart pounding, as she studied the faded, ancient script, unable to fully decipher the archaic dialect herself. "According to this record," Edwin continued, "the silver mark does not simply indicate a fated bond between two individuals. It indicates a bond specifically destined to unite bloodlines torn apart by generations of conflict, bringing lasting peace between packs previously locked in cycles of rivalry and distrust." Cade's expression grew increasingly serious as Edwin continued translating the ancient passage. "The scroll suggests," Edwin said, "that the individual bearing this mark carries bloodlines from both warring factions, though the specific origins were often deliberately hidden or forgotten over generations, to protect the individual from being targeted before the bond could be fulfilled." Elira's breath caught sharply. "Are you suggesting my own bloodline carries some hidden significance?" Edwin nodded slowly. "I believe so, yes. I took the liberty of researching your family lineage further, given the significance of this discovery. Your mother's family, the Voss line, has long been established within this territory. But your father's lineage, it seems, traces back to a northern bloodline believed lost generations ago, following a devastating conflict between rival packs that nearly destroyed both territories entirely." "What bloodline?" Cade asked sharply, sensing the profound significance building steadily within Edwin's revelation. Edwin hesitated only briefly before answering. "The Kestrel bloodline, my lord. A line believed extinguished nearly a century ago, following a war so devastating that survivors deliberately erased all record of their heritage to protect any remaining descendants from becoming targets of continued violence." Cade's expression shifted rapidly through shock, recognition, and finally, dawning understanding. "The Kestrel bloodline," he repeated slowly, "was directly connected to the Ashgrove line, generations ago, before the conflict fractured our territories entirely. Elira sat in stunned silence, struggling to process the magnitude of what Edwin's discovery implied. You believe I am descended from a bloodline connected to your own family? It would explain everything, Cade said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. The mark, the prophecy, the reason our bond feels so significant, beyond simple fate or coincidence. Our bloodlines were always meant to reunite, Elira. History simply forced them apart before that reunion could occur naturally. Edwin nodded solemnly. This discovery holds tremendous significance, my lord. If made public, it would confirm beyond any doubt the legitimacy of your bond, silencing any remaining skepticism from those who continue questioning its validity. But it also increases the danger, Cade said grimly, understanding the full weight of the implication. If those responsible for the earlier attacks against our alliance discover this connection, they may see Elira as an even greater threat to their ambitions. Elira felt a chill settle over her despite the warmth of the study. Why would this discovery threaten anyone further? Because, Cade explained carefully, if your bloodline confirms a legitimate, prophesied unification between our packs, it would strengthen our alliance beyond anything mere political agreement could achieve. Those seeking to prevent our cooperation would see this revelation as the final obstacle standing between them and whatever goals they are pursuing. A tense silence settled over the room as the full implications of Edwin's discovery sank in. Elira, who had spent her entire life believing herself cursed and unworthy, now found herself at the center of a revelation, with the power to reshape the future of two entire packs. What do we do with this knowledge? She finally asked. Cade considered carefully before answering. We proceed cautiously, but we do not hide it. Elira, your heritage is nothing to be ashamed of, or concealed. If anything, it deserves to be celebrated, both for your own sake and for the message it sends to everyone who has doubted your worth. Over the following days, Cade and Elira carefully prepared to share Edwin's discovery with both pack councils, understanding the delicate balance required to reveal such significant information without provoking further instability. Edwin worked tirelessly to verify every detail of the ancient scroll, cross-referencing historical records to ensure the revelation could withstand any scrutiny. When the formal announcement finally occurred, the reaction throughout both packs proved even more profound than anyone had anticipated. Elira Voss, once dismissed as cursed and unworthy, was now recognized as the direct descendant of a bloodline, believed lost for nearly a century, her very existence symbolizing the healing of wounds that had divided these territories for generations. Elders who had once questioned her worthiness now approached her with genuine respect, recognizing the profound significance of her heritage. Pack members who had mocked her throughout childhood found themselves humbled by the realization that the very mark they once feared actually represented one of the rarest and most meaningful bonds in their shared history. Yet amid this overwhelming validation, Elira remained grounded, understanding that her worth had never truly depended on bloodline or prophecy in the first place. This changes how everyone perceives me, she said quietly to Cade one evening, but it does not change who I actually am. No, Cade agreed, drawing her close. You were always worthy, Elira, long before Edwin uncovered this scroll. This discovery simply forces everyone else to finally recognize what I saw from the very beginning. As news of the ancient bloodline connection spread beyond their own territories, reaching neighboring packs throughout the northern regions, the alliance between Voss and Ashgrove grew stronger than anyone could have previously imagined. What began as a fragile political arrangement had transformed into a symbol of hope and healing, embodied entirely within the bond between Cade and Elira. Yet even as celebrations spread throughout both packs, Cade remained watchful, aware that the very individuals responsible for earlier attacks against their alliance would not simply accept this revelation without one final, desperate attempt to prevent the unification their bond represented. He resolved quietly, without alarming Elira further, to ensure that whatever remaining threats lingered in the shadows would be addressed swiftly and decisively, before they could threaten the extraordinary future now unfolding before them. The Grand Hall had never looked so magnificent, its stone walls draped in banners bearing the combined emblems of the Voss and Ashgrove packs, silver and deep blue woven together, in a design created specifically to honor the historic union about to take place. Elira stood in a private chamber adjoining the hall, her heart racing, as Clara carefully adjusted the final details of her gown. a stunning creation of pale silver silk that caught the light with every movement, the fabric chosen deliberately to honor the mark that had once brought her nothing but pain and now symbolized her greatest triumph. "You look radiant," Clara said, tears glistening in her eyes as she stepped back to admire her lifelong friend. "I still remember when you used to hide that mark beneath high collars, terrified of anyone noticing it." Illyra smiled softly, glancing at her own reflection in the mirror, the silver mark on her collarbone now displayed proudly, rather than concealed in shame. "It feels strange," she admitted, "how something I once viewed as my greatest curse has become the very thing connecting me to everything I never believed I deserved." "You deserved it all along," Clara said firmly. "This pack simply needed time to recognize what was always true." A gentle knock interrupted them, and Illyra's mother entered, her expression filled with quiet pride and lingering emotion. "It is time," she said softly, offering her daughter a warm, trembling smile. Illyra took a steadying breath, allowing herself one final moment to fully absorb the significance of what was about to unfold. The frightened, rejected young Omega, who had once stood at the very back of the choosing ceremony line, expecting nothing but further humiliation, was now moments away from being formally recognized as Luna of the Ashgrove Pack, bonded eternally to the most respected alpha in the Northern Territories. The doors of the Grand Hall opened, and Illyra stepped forward, her breath catching at the overwhelming sight before her. Every seat within the hall was filled, members from both the Voss and Ashgrove packs gathered together, their expressions reflecting genuine celebration rather than the skepticism and cruelty that had once defined her existence among them. At the far end of the hall, standing beneath an arch decorated with silver ribbons, Cade waited, dressed in formal attire that emphasized his commanding presence, though his gray eyes softened the moment they found her among the crowd. Illyra walked slowly down the aisle, her earlier nervousness gradually replaced by quiet, steady confidence with each step forward. The elders who had once dismissed her as cursed now rose respectfully as she passed, their expressions filled with genuine acknowledgement of the remarkable journey that had led to this extraordinary moment. When she finally reached Cade, he took her hands gently within his own, his gray eyes reflecting fierce, unwavering devotion. "You have come a long way," he murmured quietly, just for her ears, from the frightened young woman standing at the edge of a ceremony hall, expecting nothing but rejection. "I have," Illyra agreed softly, "because you refused to see me, the way everyone else did." The pack elder overseeing the formal bonding ceremony stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd with solemn reverence. "We gather today," he began, "to witness the formal union of Alpha Cade Ashgrove and Illyra Voss, whose bond represents far more than simple partnership. Their union heals a century-old fracture between two once-divided bloodlines, restoring unity and strength to territories long separated by conflict and misunderstanding." He turned toward Illyra, his expression warm with genuine respect. "Illyra Voss, once wrongly regarded by this very pack as cursed, has proven through unwavering courage and quiet strength that true worth cannot be diminished by ignorance or fear. Today, she steps into her rightful place, not simply as an alpha's mate, but as Luna of the combined Ashgrove and Voss territories." Illyra felt tears welling in her eyes as the weight of those words settled fully within her heart. Every painful memory of rejection, every whispered insult, every moment of loneliness she had endured throughout her life seemed to finally find resolution within this singular, triumphant moment. Cade lifted her hand gently to his lips before addressing the crowd himself, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "I have led warriors into difficult confrontations. I have negotiated fragile alliances between territories on the brink of conflict, but nothing I have ever accomplished compares to the honor of standing before you today, bonded to a woman whose strength and grace have taught me more about true leadership than any battle ever could." He turned to face Illyra fully, his expression filled with open, unguarded devotion. "Illyra Voss, you saved my life without hesitation. You showed me kindness when the world showed you only cruelty. You have earned every bit of respect and honor this ceremony bestows upon you today, not through prophecy or ancient bloodline alone, but through the strength of your own character." The formal bonding proceeded, ancient words spoken between them, sealing their connection before both packs and the moon spirits their people had honored for generations. When the ceremony concluded, The hall erupted into genuine, joyous celebration, a stark and beautiful contrast to the cold rejection Elira had once experienced within these very walls. As the celebration continued late into the evening, Elira found herself standing beside Cade, near the edge of the hall, watching members from both packs mingling together, with genuine warmth and camaraderie, the old divisions and prejudices steadily fading beneath the weight of their combined future. "Do you realize," Cade said quietly, wrapping an arm gently around her shoulders, "that you have single-handedly transformed how two entire packs perceive worth and belonging?" Elira leaned into his embrace, watching the joyful scene before her with quiet wonder. "I never imagined this outcome," she admitted. "For so long, I believed I would spend my entire life being pushed toward the margins, unwanted and unseen." "And now?" Cade asked softly. Elira turned to face him fully, her expression radiant with hard-earned confidence and genuine happiness. "Now I understand that the very thing everyone once called my curse was actually my greatest strength, waiting patiently for someone willing to see its true worth." Cade's gray eyes softened with profound tenderness. "I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never again doubt that worth, Elira." As the celebration continued around them, filled with laughter, warmth, and the steady healing of generations-old wounds, Elira allowed herself, finally and completely, to embrace the belonging she had once believed impossible. The cursed Omega everyone had rejected now stood as Luna beside the most legendary Alpha in the Northern Territories, her silver mark no longer a symbol of shame, but a lasting testament to the truth she had always carried within her, waiting patiently for the world to finally recognize it. And as Cade drew her close beneath the glow of the celebration lights, Elira understood, with complete and unwavering certainty, that she had finally, truly, found where she belonged.